Have you ever wondered why a man often desires most the woman who is no longer within his grasp? Why her absence, more than her presence, sears itself into his psyche like an unhealed wound? This is not merely longing, nor is it simple nostalgia. It is the confrontation of his unconscious with what Jung called the anima, the eternal feminine within him, projected outward onto her form. When she withdraws, she ceases to be just flesh and blood. She becomes myth. She becomes symbol. She becomes the mirror in which he sees both his emptiness and his hunger. In her absence, he is haunted, not because she is extraordinary in some worldly sense, but because her withdrawal has stripped him of the illusion that he was in control. He mistook her warmth for possession, her availability for permanence. Yet when she vanished, he discovered the truth. What he thought he owned was never his. It was a gift. And the man who cannot recognize gifts lives as a slave to loss. She, on the other hand, has crossed a threshold. The act of stepping away transforms her into something untouchable. Not because she has hardened her heart, but because she has remembered her worth. Most women underestimate the erotic power of absence, not realizing that withdrawal speaks louder than seduction, that silence resounds deeper than words. A man will chase words, but he will be devoured by silence. This silence is not passive. It is an active force, the echo of a boundary finally drawn. It unsettles him because it mirrors the void inside him, the void he has spent a lifetime covering with achievements, distractions, and fleeting pleasures. Her absence does not create his emptiness. It reveals it. That revelation is intolerable to his ego, for the ego craves constant confirmation that it exists through another's attention. When she withdraws that attention, he is left naked before himself, forced to face what Seneca once called the great poverty, the inability to be content with one's own soul. The paradox is brutal and yet intoxicating. Her absence makes her more real to him than her presence ever did. When she was near, she was ordinary. When she is gone, she is infinite. This is the cruelty of projection. He cannot distinguish between the woman herself and the archetype she has awakened within him. He obsesses not over her daily mannerisms, her smile, her voice. He obsesses over what she has stirred in him, a sleeping dragon of desire, fear, and dependency. He wants not just her body, but the part of himself that came alive in her presence. And so he clings to the phantom, long after the woman has already walked into her own freedom. You must understand, this is not about romance. This is about psychology. This is about the male ego colliding with the reality that it cannot command the feminine. Every man carries within him a desperate hunger for union, but when that hunger is tied to possession, it breeds torment. He does not miss her as a person. He misses the reflection of his own unlived soul that she carried. This is why he cannot let go, because to let go of her would mean to let go of the illusion that she was the missing piece. But she was never the missing piece. She was the mirror. And mirrors, once removed, leave him staring at bare walls he cannot bear to see. For the woman, this revelation is both painful and liberating. Painful because she may realize how deeply she was reduced to an image, an archetype projected onto her flesh. Liberating because in stepping back, she is no longer imprisoned by his gaze. Her absence is a reclamation, a withdrawal from the stage where she was cast not as herself, but as his anima, his muse, his cure. And what greater erotic power exists than to be ungraspable, to live beyond the confines of another's fantasy? This is the strange alchemy of detachment. The less she seeks to be wanted, the more he wants. The moment she loosens her grip, his soul tightens its own. This is not about games. It is about energy. It is about polarity. It is about the eternal dance between dependence and sovereignty, between illusion and truth. And if you are listening as a woman, let this pierce you. Your absence is not weakness. Your silence is not loss. It is the very space where your dignity breathes. A man may be haunted by your withdrawal, but you must never return simply because his ache calls louder than your worth. The Stoics warned that we belong only to ourselves. Epictetus wrote that no one can harm you without your consent. To remain absent when your soul calls for absence is not cruelty, it is wisdom. The erotic power of absence lies not in punishing him, but in liberating yourself. For in that liberation, you embody what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, no longer chained to the projections of another, no longer needing to serve as someone else's reflection. And in this wholeness, you discover a secret. You were never powerless. You were only misplaced. His obsession deepens not in the moments she was near, but in the hollow hours of her withdrawal. Her absence grows into a cathedral of echoes, each thought of her a bell tolling against the walls of his psyche. He does not admit this aloud, but his body betrays him. Sleepless nights, sudden surges of memory, a restless hunger that no distraction can soothe. He scrolls through fragments of her, photos, messages, old conversations, searching for traces of life, as though the ghost of her presence might reach through the screen and give him breath again. Yet the more he seeks her, the further she recedes, for what he is chasing is not her, but the projection he built around her. This is the paradox of projection. It inflates the ordinary into the divine. What he adored in her was not merely her laughter, her movements, or the light in her eyes. It was the anima within him, the inner feminine, emerging in her form. Jung taught that a man who has not integrated his anima is doomed to chase it externally, forever searching for completion in women he cannot truly possess. Thus, when she is gone, he is left stranded between two worlds, the tangible woman who has departed and the eternal feminine that still lingers in his unconscious, whispering to him through dreams, memories, and fantasies. Absence has become the doorway through which his unconscious speaks, louder than ever before. He cannot silence it, because her silence amplifies it. He cannot grasp her because she has moved beyond the reach of his ego. And so, he spirals, because the very thing he lost is the very thing he cannot reclaim. His projection. She is broken free from the role he cast her in, and now she exists in her own sovereign truth. For her, the withdrawal is not cruelty, but necessity. She has understood a law of power that few women dare to embrace. Presence binds, absence defines. While presence feeds his comfort, absence awakens his longing. While presence nourishes his ego, absence exposes his dependency. She has stopped feeding the beast of his need, and in doing so she forces him to confront the one thing he fears most, his own incompleteness. This is why he cannot let go, because letting go of her absence would mean letting go of the illusion that completion lies outside of himself. It would mean turning inward, descending into the labyrinth of his shadow, confronting the loneliness he has avoided since childhood. Many men cannot endure this descent. They would rather cling to the phantom of a woman than enter the silence of their own soul. And you, if you have ever been this woman, must understand the sacred nature of your withdrawal. Do not mistake his obsession as proof of your worth. His hunger is not for you as you are, but for what he has projected onto you. That is why he idealizes you most in your absence. Because distance removes the flaws, the humanness, the reality. Distance allows the fantasy to breathe. Yet your true worth does not live in his fantasy. It lives in your reality, in the choice to step beyond the prison of his gaze and into the sanctuary of your own becoming. The erotic power of absence is this: it transforms you from an object into a mystery, from something possessed into something unpossessable. In myth, the goddess is never fully grasped. She is glimpsed, pursued, revered, but always retains her autonomy. This is not arrogance, it is archetypal truth. The feminine that cannot be caged is the feminine that awakens reverence. and reverence is far more powerful than possession. Notice how his obsession intensifies the more she refuses to return. This is not because she is cruel, but because her boundary slices through his illusions. He is forced to confront the fact that desire cannot command sovereignty. His desire may burn, but her sovereignty remains untouched. That is the alchemy of absence. It teaches him a lesson his ego resists, that no matter how much he longs, he does not control the feminine. The Stoics understood this as well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Her absence becomes his teacher, for she reminds him that he does not control her fate, her choices, her silence. He must either learn to master himself or remain enslaved to longing. And for her, the teaching is just as profound. Her worth is not proven by being chosen. Her worth is revealed in choosing herself, even if it means enduring the ache of his pursuit from afar. This ache, paradoxically, becomes the very thing that binds him to her memory. Every attempt to forget her only strengthens the hold. Every new lover becomes a pale comparison, every distraction a hollow substitute. Why? Because the human psyche is addicted not to what it has, but to what it cannot touch. Scarcity amplifies desire, and absence creates scarcity more potent than any game of seduction could ever achieve. But the woman who embodies this absence wisely does not wield it as a weapon. She does not disappear to manipulate, but to liberate. She withdraws because her soul demands room to breathe, because her path requires detachment, because her individuation calls her forward. Her absence is not for him, it is for herself. And in this self-loyalty she embodies the highest form of erotic power, to be desired not because she plays a role, but because she refuses to. In the quiet expanse of her absence, something radical occurs. He begins to experience the collapse of his illusions. At first, he fights it. He bargains with memory, clinging to fragments of what once was. He tells himself that she will return, that she cannot live without him, that no woman could resist the gravity of his presence. But beneath the surface he knows these words are hollow. What he confronts is not her decision to walk away, but the unveiling of his dependency. Her absence has exposed how fragile his sense of self truly is, how dependent it has always been upon external validation. The irony is sharp. When she was present, he overlooked her. He assumed her nearness was guaranteed, her devotion unquestionable. It is only when she withdraws that he recognizes her value. But this recognition does not come as enlightenment. It comes as torment. He feels the sting of abandonment, though in truth she has not abandoned him at all. She has only ceased to carry the weight of his ego. He confuses her liberation with betrayal, because his ego believes it is entitled to her loyalty. This is the ancient wound of the masculine, the illusion of ownership over the feminine. It appears in myths, in religions, in history itself. The attempt to bind, to contain, to control what by its very essence resists containment. The feminine is fluid, elusive, untamed. It is water slipping through clenched fists, fire blazing beyond the hearth. When she leaves, she does not simply depart physically. She reclaims the archetype of the untouchable goddess, the one who cannot be owned, only reverenced. And reverence demands distance. He may attempt to replace her with another, but no substitute satisfies, for what he longs for is not the woman herself, but the part of himself she awakened. Each new face reminds him of the one who withdrew, because absence has elevated her beyond comparison. The other women may be present, but presence without mystery cannot compete with absence that haunts. He is intoxicated not by her smile or her words, but by the wound of not having her. And so he bleeds into his own longing, unable to stitch the cut. For her, this absence is initiation. It forces her into her sovereignty. By withdrawing, she confronts the temptation to collapse back into his need. The feminine is often conditioned to soothe, to comfort, to remain available. To resist this conditioning requires immense courage. Her silence is a rebellion against the demand that she exist for another's validation. It is an act of individuation, in which she steps out of the shadow of his gaze and into the light of her own soul. And here lies the erotic paradox. The less she offers, the more his hunger grows. He wants her because she has chosen not to need him. He burns for her because she no longer burns for him. This asymmetry destabilizes his ego, yet it is precisely this destabilization that forces growth. Jung reminded us that the shadow, when faced, becomes the doorway to transformation. For him, her absence becomes shadow work, the invitation to meet his own emptiness and ask why he cannot endure solitude. But many men resist this initiation. Instead of turning inward, they chase harder outward. They send endless messages, make grand gestures, or drown themselves in distractions. They refuse to sit in the silence that her absence has created. And yet the silence remains. It stretches like an abyss between them, demanding that he either descend or forever wander at the edges. You must see the power of this silence. As a woman, you may doubt yourself. You may think your absence makes you cold, heartless, unworthy. Yet this is the conditioning of a world that fears the sovereign feminine. In truth, your absence is not destruction, it is purification. It is the fire that burns away illusions, the night that reveals the stars. Do not confuse his obsession with proof of love. It is proof of the void within him, the void he must face alone. The Stoics would remind us here, desire is the seed of suffering when it seeks control over what is not ours. Epictetus would say that what belongs to you can never be taken, and what can be taken was never yours to begin with. For him, her absence is a lesson in humility. For her, it is a lesson in power, and so the erotic power of her absence is not in tormenting him but in liberating herself. Her silence is not a weapon, it is a sanctuary. She has ceased to exist as his reflection, his muse, his possession. She exists now only as herself. And in this sovereignty, she embodies a mystery greater than desire itself. The mystery of a woman who does not need to be chosen in order to know her worth. Her absence does more than haunt him, it dismantles him. Day by day, her silence becomes a mirror held to his soul, showing him not what he has lost, but what he has never built within himself. Without her presence to feed his ego, the scaffolding of his identity trembles. He realizes how much of his worth was borrowed from her attention, her affirmation, her nearness. Now stripped of that supply, he wanders in a wasteland of self-doubt. He may appear composed, but inwardly he is unraveling. This unraveling is the very work he has avoided his entire life. Jung insisted that individuation, the path to wholeness, begins in the confrontation with shadow. But most men fear the shadow. They project it onto the women they desire, believing that union with her will complete them. Yet the truth is cruel. No woman can complete a man who has not faced his emptiness, and when she withdraws, the illusion crumbles. He stands alone before the abyss, and it terrifies him. In that terror, she becomes immortal, not in body, not in reality, but in the psyche he cannot master. He may take other lovers, he may surround himself with noise, but the image of her absence remains. It presses into his dreams, into his quiet moments, into the pauses between conversations. She is no longer a woman. She has become an archetype, the anima in its most powerful form. Unattainable, unreachable, sovereign. And because she is unattainable, she is eternal. Yet for her, the journey is different. Absence teaches her the sacred art of detachment. She does not wield it to harm, though he may feel wounded. She does not withhold to punish, though his ego interprets it as cruelty. She withdraws because she must. She recognizes that remaining in his orbit would diminish her, erode her selfhood, keep her bound in the cycle of being everything but herself. And so she steps back, not in malice, but in fidelity to her own becoming. This fidelity is her erotic power. The refusal to collapse back into his need, the refusal to trade her silence for his comfort, is what makes her luminous. He may crave her return, but her strength lies in not answering the call of his longing. For if she returns merely to soothe his ache, she loses herself again. And the woman who loses herself cannot be desired. She can only be consumed. True eroticism is not found in self-sacrifice, but in sovereignty, in the ability to stand alone, radiant in absence. Her absence compels him to face the truth that desire is never about the other. It is always about the self. What he longs for is not her body, but the part of himself he glimpsed through her presence. He mistakes her for salvation, but she was only the mirror. She was never the cure. She was the invitation to confront the wound. And now, in her silence, he either accepts that invitation or remains forever enslaved to longing. This is why absence is the most potent form of presence. Her silence speaks where words would fail. Her withdrawal forces the lesson that presence could never teach, that love cannot heal what self-reflection refuses to touch. A man cannot be made whole by a woman who sacrifices herself for his comfort. He becomes whole only when he endures the agony of absence and learns to claim his own soul. And you, if you have ever been this woman, must see the immensity of your power, not in how he aches for you, not in how he obsesses, not in how he cannot let go. Your power lies in the fact that you no longer need to be the answer to his ache. Your absence is the sign that you have chosen yourself. It is the boundary that guards your spirit, the sanctuary that keeps your essence untarnished. Remember, the Stoics declared that freedom is found not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. Marcus Aurelius urged us to stop craving what is not ours and begin tending to the mind we inhabit. Your absence is an act of Stoic discipline. It teaches him that he cannot control you, and it teaches you that you do not exist to be controlled. In this paradox, both are offered a chance at liberation. He, through the humbling of his ego, you, through the reclaiming of your soul. The erotic power of absence, then, is not a game of seduction. It is an initiation. For him, into his shadow. For you, into your sovereignty. It strips away illusions until what remains is truth. The truth that no one is entitled to your presence, that your silence is sacred, and that to withdraw is not weakness, but wisdom. And in that wisdom you find your final freedom, the ability to walk away without fear, to live without needing to be remembered, to choose yourself without apology. This is the fire at the heart of absence. Not the fire of vengeance, but the fire of rebirth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.